Hey,
Okay. All right. Tell people who you are and what you're in here to say.
hey, my name's Vince. I've been following your channel for quite a while. I really like your content. I started out growing up in eastern Missouri and being raised basically a Republican and then kind of moving into the libertarian mindset. And thanks to the persistence of a really good friend, helped me tear down the walls and all the programming against helping one another, aka communism. And I just wanted to basically come on and say we're not all bad.
Well, first, let me understand where you're coming from. Now, when you say you're a supporter of communism,
Yeah.
you're not talking about a communist political system. You're talking as more of as opposed to capitalism, not as opposed to democracy.
I'm an anti-capitalist. However, I also do recognize that there are problems with how communism has been done throughout the years. But I do think
well, no one's done actual communism. They usually just do fascism and call it communism.
Well, that's the same thing as like saying, you know, America isn't actually a capitalist nation because we don't have an entirely free market. That's kind of just
an oligarchy.
Yeah, it's just more a way of getting around what is being said. What is being said is that there's this idea that we all help one another with the national funding of everybody, and we distribute those things to food, clothing, people in need. I know that you're, kind of on the left side when it comes to charity and stuff. I just want to take it a step further. I do believe that as a political philosophy, it can be a good thing. But with that being said, I think Marx and Engels had several different things wrong. Like, for instance, I'm a Christian communist, whereas Marx and Engels, they talked about religion being kind of a bad thing.
Well, communism doesn't equate to atheism. There's been all kinds of religious communists. I mean, look at the influence of the Roman Catholic Church and all this other stuff on lots of communist regimes.
And I get that you understand that, but a lot of other people, they just repeat the same lines of like, communist is atheism, therefore we must hate them if we want to preserve God.
No, because I am an atheist. I'm the thing that they think is even worse than communism. I am not a supporter of communism because, and here's why I'll say I don't support communism. Now, I'm not going to say I don't agree with a lot of things Marx said, because Marxism is not communism. Marxism was more about how you should run your market system and how the power should be with the people who produce the items, not the power of not the person who is the CEO of the company.
Yeah.
And whatever you're moving around a lot's making a lot of noise. So,
I'm sorry. I'll take my hands off the phone here. I have my hand on it.
One of the main reasons that I can't support communism is because it's like a free market that doesn't have any checks on it. But I would know if a free market has absolutely no checks, the power doesn't rest with the consumer. Well, then it's not free market. It's an oligarchy, and I don't like that. But the same thing with communism. Whoever is in charge of signing the checks or deciding where the money goes, they end up being the leader. And they, like, even in countries that claim they're communist, do you think that Jinping or whatever his name is, do you think he lives at the same level that every other person in China does? No.
China's been a capitalist nation for decades now, so that's kind of a moot point.
But they call themselves communists.
Yeah. That's the problem. A lot of people will call themselves communists, but they don't. It's like, I'm sure you've seen Christians who are like, oh, I love Jesus, blah, 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 and then they don't know a lick about what the Bible says. I think it's kind of the same scenario kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I probably have more of an understanding of communism than most average people do, simply because I've researched the two to compare the things. But like I said, it's too easily of an exploited system, because in a system where everybody's supposed to be equal, no one ends up being equal. There always ends up being a ruling class. And it leads to fascism even faster than a free market does. A free market doesn't give all the power to the politicians, it gives the power to the people who can afford to pay for the politicians. So it's a little bit more of a buffer, but not much of one.
Let me make a comparison between how our nation was founded and how communism is supposed to work. In America, we're supposed to be a nation by the people, of the people, and for the people, correct? However, we don't see that being acted out within our legislature, within all of our different elected groups. And it's the same thing with communism. It's supposed to be, like you said, a classless society of the people, where people like you, like me, who go out and work every day, have a say in those things, which is the ideal of the representative system, but it just hasn't really worked out. And so we're both based on the same idea, that we want a government that is made up of the people and is ruled by the people. It's just what we do with it whenever we, step off the starting line at that point. And I acknowledge there's been a lot of nations that have called themselves communists that have strayed far from the path of trying to achieve equality. And we tend to focus on those guys rather than people like Thomas Sankara.
Well, I think what you're trying to say is that in an ideal world, you would prefer a perfect communist system over a perfect free market system? Or do you think if you could actually have a perfect free market system, that it would be better than communism? I want to kind of clear that.
I believe both the capitalist dream and the communist dream is a pipe dream. Neither of them will ever come to full fruition. However, I do think if we had a society that's basic morals and values were based upon feeding the hungry, clothing the clothless, housing the houseless, and giving medical care to those who need medical care, rather than this competitive system in which the person down the street is constantly trying to out-earn and outdo me, and I'm doing the same thing back to him, which leads to medicine being charged for, food being charged for, and people being able to sit on a mountain of those things. Okay. So I think
where I would differ strongly from you in this position is, even though I think communism, it might be a wonderful utopia if someone can do it perfectly, I don't think it is a perfect system. And even when done perfectly, because I think a lot of the motivation is taken away from people to ever achieve anything. And without that, can you mute when you're not talking? Because it's a lot of noise.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. The problem is that even a perfectly done communistic system, it takes away a lot of the incentive to do more and to be more. And whereas a free economy, a free market allows for that. But unfortunately, when a free market gets corrupted, it makes it to where the people that already have everything rig the game so that no one else can have anything. So I do recognize that. But if I could choose between an ideal communist market and an ideal free market, I would always choose the ideal free market, because I think there's more motivation there and there's more focus on the individual there. Whereas in communism, I think people surrender a little bit of individualism and they surrender that motivation to be more, because, not everybody wants to be the same. Some people want to be more, and those people go on to create great things, invent new things. And I understand what you're saying about a society that feeds the poor and houses the homeless and clothes the clothless and, all that stuff. And to me, that's supposed to be Christianity. That's what the churches and stuff are supposed to be doing, but they don't. And I've never understood why people who say, I'm a Christian and he needs to pull himself up by his bootstraps. Well, that's not Christian at all. The Christian idea would be, I'm a Christian. That guy fell down. I'm going to go pick him up and give him everything I have and hope he gets back on his way in the right form and fashion. That would be the Christian idealism, not pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's anti-Christian, but they've adopted that. And also one of the reasons I don't like communism in a way is because it, in my opinion, it in some ways brings that religious philosophy of it's every man's obligation to help every other man into a political system. And I don't believe it's every man's obligation to help the other man. I believe it's every man's obligation to help himself and his family and blah, 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 and to wish well for others and to hopefully do well for others. But I don't think it should be the system where it's required, because if you force people to be good and help other people, well, then there's nobody who's actually being good. They're just doing it at the end of a gun barrel. It's like when Christians are only good so they don't go to hell. I'm like, well, that's not really being good. That's just being afraid to do the things you want to do because you don't want to be punished. So if you're only moral because you're afraid of burning in hellfire for your entire life, if you're not moral because you actually care about the people you're interacting with, well, then you're not really moral. And I kind of have that same problem with communism. I don't feel it's my obligation to help everybody. I try to help as many people as I can. That's on me. That's my choice. But I don't think it's anybody's obligation to do that. And I don't think it makes a good political system because, like I said, it very quickly leads to those that, are on the backside of the guns that enforce the rules are the ones in charge, and everyone on the other side has no say in anything.
I understand what you're getting at. Whenever it comes to compelling people to do what's right, we have an entire system for that. It's called laws, ordinances, statutes. So the idea that we should just be free to do as we please, I utterly reject that, because when humans are free to do as they please, they tend to do horrible things to one another. And so I definitely think that the state is a good thing, and that the state exercising power over people to either encourage them or force them to do what is right, either through criminal proceedings or punishment, is a good thing when applied properly.
See, there's where I'm going to disagree with you also, because I don't believe that laws are there to force everybody to be good. Laws are simply there as to set forth a way to deal with people who are not good. I believe good people will generally do good things, whether the law says they have to or not. And I believe most people are generally good people that don't want to harm their neighbor. They don't want. It's like when people say, hey, if they made it legal to kill people tomorrow, and you could just kill as many people as you wanted, what would that be like? Well, it'd be like yesterday, because I killed as many people as I wanted to yesterday, which was 0. And I'll want to kill 0 people tomorrow. I think people are not controlled by laws. That's not the point of laws, in my opinion. And when it gets to that point, which is like I said, a lot of the people like to do, they like to use law to tell people, how they can have sex, or, what they're allowed to do in their own home and all these other things. I don't like when laws do that.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Laws should just be there to punish people that are not good, not to control people that already are, because they don't need to be controlled.
A good example is, for 400 years, it was legal in the colonies and up to into the United States to own another human being. And it took a law, it took a war, it took guns to go and literally kill people and say, you will not own another human being.
And most people did not own another human being. And a lot of people think that back in the day, like in 1776, that everybody was okay with slavery. Everybody loved slavery. No, that's not the case. A lot of people had problems with slavery. It was mainly the ruling class that owned slaves, and it was most supported by the church. The church was the biggest supporter of slavery. And that was more when they allowed religion to be setting behavior. And I don't like that at all in modern day or back then. But to pretend that everybody was okay with slavery in 1776 is ridiculous. About 85% of people would be against slavery if you could have done a poll back then. Vast majority of people worked their own farms, worked their own land, made their own money, raised their own cattle, did their own job, whatever. They didn't have slaves. It was the ruling class used religion to justify an obscene behavior, and they're the ones that benefited from it.
I can definitely agree with the religious aspect of that. That's one of the things that blights the past of my faith, is how so many people just did not care what it said and just did their own thing. So I definitely agree with you there. I can't necessarily agree with the high number of 86% being okay with it. It's not like today you have a small percent of people who are like openly racist, who will call somebody an N-word, out in public, but the large majority of people won't stop and defend a black person if they saw them being called the N-word in public. It's complicity, which is equally evil in my viewpoint.
Well, that goes back to my point that I don't think someone has an obligation to defend someone else. It's nice if they do, but I'm never going to say they have to. And if they didn't, they're somehow liable, liable. And I'm just, I wouldn't say that. I would like to see more people step up. I do believe that for every one person that would call someone the N-word in public, there are probably 80 or 90 people that would never consider doing that. But also only probably 5 or 6 of them would ever feel comfortable getting involved enough to say something about it. That's a different thing. And or should they even be obligated? It's like saying, because I carry a gun, if I see someone committing a crime, am I obligated to get involved and risk my own safety to protect someone who's not carrying a gun? I don't think I'm obligated at all, neither morally nor legally, to help that person, especially if that person's an adult. That person had every right to be carrying a gun and be protected and take responsibility for their own safety. And I shouldn't have to risk my safety because they chose not to. Now, it's different if it's like an elderly old person or a child. That's different. But as far as defending other adults, I'm just like, dude, you had every chance to do anything I did, and you chose not to.
I understand what you're saying. I think that is our fundamental disagreement, because that does seem to be what it boils down to. I appreciate you having me on. I'm at work right now, so I'm going to go and do my calls and check-ins and stuff. It was really a good thing to get to talk with you about this, Yankee. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks for coming.